Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. You are looking at a Christian journalist standing in a Muslim majority nation in the shadow of an Israeli embassy. It's located in that very interesting building that you see there over my right shoulder. Needless to say, this isn't something you see every day in the Middle East, but it's very normal here in Bahrain. Welcome to Manama, the Bahraini capital. We are on the Bahraini Bay right now, a very beautiful nation, a very beautiful area here. Bahrain is a tiny island nation off the coast of Saudi Arabia in the middle of the Arabian Gulf. Some call it the Persian Gulf. They prefer Arabian Gulf here in Bahrain. Only 295 square miles overall, but this tiny nation is punching far above its weight. This is an Abraham Accords nation. It signed a peace treaty along with the UAE with Israel back in 2020, and the blessings are already rolling in for Bahrain. In my travels here over the past few days, things are happening. Business is booming. The economy is thriving. There's construction everywhere you look. Not only new business coming here, but houses being built. It's a very exciting time here in Bahrain. This is a peace-loving place, friendly, warm, tolerant people. We've been welcomed with open arms as part of the first ever evangelical Christian media delegation to visit this country. And the main reason we're here is to dig deep on the effects of the Abraham Accords. Okay, the deal was signed in 2020. I was at the White House in September 2020 for the signing ceremony on the White House lawn. Now what? It was an historic day, of course, a lot of excitement around it, but what have been the after effects? How has this grown? Well, we've seen here on the ground that it has grown exponentially, and Bahraini officials that I've talked to say, hey, we've got great things planned with Israel in really every sector. Security, of course, more on that in a minute, but also tourism, industry, business. So things are blossoming here, and some beautiful architecture, some of the most interesting architecture that I've ever seen. And as a Christian, hey, up to 10% of the population here in Bahrain is Christian, mostly guest workers from places like the Philippines and India, but there are churches here, and we paid a visit, and we'll show you here in the days to come on the newscast, at the largest church in all of Arabia, in the entire region, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait. It's located right here in Bahrain. So we talked about all of that with Bahraini officials, but of course, we are just 100 miles from Iran right now, folks. It's right across the Gulf. So of course, one of the main topics of conversation here in Manama over the past few days has been the Iranian threat, in particular, three things that we hit on frequently here, of course, on the Watchman Newscast. Number one, the Iranian nuclear program. Number two, Iran's ballistic missile program. And number three, Iran's drone program, its attack drone program, which it has used to great effect across the region, working mostly through proxies, as we've laid out here many times on the Watchman Newscast. Think of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, those militias in Iraq and Syria, armed to the teeth, courtesy of the Iranian regime, with those ballistic missiles and attack drones. Well, put yourself in Bahrain's shoes, just 100 miles from the head of the snake in Iran. Now, we're not talking about the Iranian people, we're talking about the Iranian regime. We love the Iranian people. The regime is the problem, and the main victims of the regime, first and foremost, are the Iranian people. But then you have folks in the neighborhood here, like Bahrain. Now, I want to break down what I'm hearing from Bahraini officials about the Iranian threat, but a quick note, especially to my American viewers, and we have viewers from around the world, but if you're an American saying, hey, where's Bahrain on the map? Well, it's in the Arabian Gulf, as I mentioned, off the coast of Saudi Arabia. But number two, you might be saying, well, why should I care as an American or a Westerner, or really no matter where you live? Well, the U.S. Fifth Fleet is based right here in Bahrain. This is their headquarters. That means some 20,000 U.S. sailors and Marines are based right here in Bahrain, along with 2 aircraft carriers, some fighter jets for sure, and a very close working relationship, lots of cooperation between the U.S. military and the Bahraini military. And these are some of the most pivotal and strategic and important waters in the world, of course, whether the Fifth Fleet is patrolling the Arabian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, the Indian Ocean, the Straits of Hormuz, of course. They're doing it from here, from Bahrain. So again, this tiny nation punching far above its weight in many areas. And this is what Bahraini officials feel about the Iranian nuclear threat. Remember, this is a Muslim nation, of course, majority Shia, but many Sunnis here as well. Iran also Shia majority, and Iran, according to Bahraini officials, over the years has been attempting to sow discord here inside Bahrain. Now think of the Iranian model in Lebanon, of course, where Hezbollah, Iran's main proxy, has gained seats in the parliament in Lebanon. The enemy within has been the strategy of Iran in Lebanon, working through Hezbollah. The same goes for Iraq. The same goes, of course, for Syria, where it's not a political thing. It's more Iranian soldiers literally on the ground with boots on the ground. And of course in Yemen through the Houthis, and of course in Gaza through Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Iran wants to do the same thing right here in Bahrain, in its immediate neighborhood, of course, establish a proxy army here in Bahrain, which of course would give Iran closer proximity to strike against Saudi Arabia, to strike against the United Arab Emirates. That's what Iran wants to do here. That's number one. But there's been some great police and security work here by Bahraini forces and certainly help from the U.S. And now that the Abraham Accords are in full effect, Israel and Bahrain have a great and growing security relationship as well. The other thing that Iran wants to do, of course, is to develop nuclear weapons. Bahrainis are concerned about those drones and missiles that have struck Saudi Arabia on a regular basis, that struck Abu Dhabi. A stone's throw from here in the United Arab Emirates over the past few months. Yes, that Iranian proxy, the Houthis, targeting Abu Dhabi as well. And Bahrain is very concerned about that coming here. But the nuclear threat that I mentioned looms large over this nation and over the entire region. Now, one interesting point to close on here is we're talking Abraham Accords. And one theme also in my discussions with the Bahraini officials, as this cooperation is just growing with Israel, a lot of synergy there, Bahraini officials would love Iron Dome. We've discussed that here in the newscast in the past. Will Israel supply Iron Dome to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, which have been, the Saudis in particular, under siege by Iranian, via the Houthis, attack drones and ballistic missiles over the months? They would like Iron Dome, I'm sure. Would Bahrain be able to obtain some Iron Dome missile defense systems? Perhaps in tandem with Israel and the U.S.? Who knows? But Bahraini officials once said, we need Iron Dome. So this would be impossible, folks. Just 5 years ago, I started off this newscast saying, hey, you're looking at a Christian journalist in a Muslim majority nation in the shadow of an Israeli embassy. But we are in prophetic times. We're in Bible times, and I believe this is something God is doing as He's moving through the nations and moving in this region right now. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is doing something special, and you can tell a lot about the Abraham Accords. Anyone who's questioned them, I say, look, who opposes them? You can tell a lot about this peace treaty, this normalization, this formalization of relations between Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, and Israel. By who opposes them? The Iranian regime, Hezbollah, Hamas, Erdogan, and Turkey, all opponents of the Abraham Accords. And that really says it all, that this is a good thing. We hope it grows. Bahraini officials want it to expand to include other nations. So we've got a lot more coming in the days to come. Bahrain, we're going to another nation after this in the region. Then we will return to Israel to wind up our trip, which is led, by the way, by my good friend Joel Rosenberg, editor-in-chief of All Israel News, best-selling author. We're joined by prominent media members and business leaders, evangelicals here in Bahrain being welcomed with open arms. Only God could do such a wonderful thing. And I will be back in this country soon, I believe. It's a special place. We'll have more for you from the region tomorrow. So from Bahrain Bay, as the sun goes down, thanks so much for joining us. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.